Welcome, everyone. Yes, what a wonderful afternoon. And it is a very, very wonderful day to learn from one of the best speakers that we've had from CILT Australia. We are very privileged today to have him with us live. Yes, I know everyone is excited, but before anything else, we'd like to thank everyone who is here today for joining us here in our webinar, and we hope that everyone will have a very meaningful day and a very insightful webinar with us. All right, so my name is Miguel, and I am your host for today's webinar entitled How Retailers Can Reduce Their Last Mile Carbon Footprint. All right, but before we begin, I know everyone's excited. Let us let us set some house rules first. So while we are listening to our valued speaker, first of all, please remember to be on mute all throughout the webinar to avoid unnecessary noise so we can hear and understand the speaker well. Second, you may hit the reaction button in your control panel. So if you can see your reaction buttons there on your control panels, kindly hit like or press the heart button so you can see if it's working for you and you can try them out. All right. Yes, very good. I can see some reactions now. All right. Great, great. Lastly, for any questions that you may have, you may type them in the chat box on your control panels, and later we will try to answer them all in the question and answer part of our program. So, can you please type in yes so we can see your names in the control panel in our chat box. I mean, can we type yes in our yes? All right, I can see one there from Jen. Hi, Jen. All right, I think everyone's chat box is completely working. All right, now let me introduce to you our speaker for today. He is the CEO and founder of the leading Australian parcel collection point network called Hub. It is a Sydney-based startup that has shaken up the long-standing e-commerce delivery space by offering an alternative approach to parcel delivery. He founded Hub in 2014 after more than 20 years of experience in the field of finance and technology. He has previously worked in organizations such as Microsoft, Datacom, and UBS. He also recently expanded his network to the Philippines, Taiwan, Hong Kong, and will soon be in additional Asian markets this year. His expertise spans multiple industries, including logistics, retail, sales, marketing, organizational change management, and category management. So, without further ado, let us all welcome Mr. David McLean. Good afternoon, Mr. David.
Hi, Miguel. How are you?
I'm good. How are you? Thank you for joining us today.
My pleasure. My pleasure. All right.
Before we start, sorry to interrupt. Before we start, I just wanted to know if you could give a background on Hub. We've just got some messages that a couple have mixed up their times when it starts, and they're expecting to come in at 6 p.m. So it might be good for the audience that we have currently to actually have a little bit of an understanding about Hub and its history, which is just really to use up a bit of time before the other attendees join in.
Sure. Okay. Well, I'm always happy to talk about Hub. So yeah, we started, as Miguel said, we started in 2014, and my background before that was 15 years at Microsoft, really running our consumer businesses. So lots of physical products, Xbox, Windows Phone, mice, keyboards, webcams. And, we used to sell full package products, so Office and Windows, when you still used to buy those things at a retail store. So most of my experience was really in retail selling these technology products. And I realized when I was leaving Microsoft that there were some really large monopolies that have a large control over a particular category for retail. And one of those is Australia Post in Australia for parcels. At the same time, I was seeing a bunch of retailers who were declining. Newsagents, for example, were really struggling because they were only selling, 4 or 5 key products, and those products were now being sold by a lot of their competitors. So there was an opportunity to create a retail network to provide a service, to give an alternative solution to the monopoly in the market, which was Australia Post. So in 2016, I think it was, after we'd done quite a bit of research and got ourselves ready, we built a technology solution that allowed customers to actually come into one of our retail locations and book a parcel and ship it around the country. And that was how we really started the business. And to be honest, that was a bit of an unmitigated disaster, because even though we had great technology, it was very hard to get these disparate independent retailers to operate in a way that gave a structured solution to customers. You know, we couldn't effectively market or brand the service. But what we did find was a lot of logistics companies were coming to us and saying, hey, look, we have a lot of missed deliveries. Is it okay if we leave our missed deliveries in your locations so that we don't have to take them back to the depot and then re-deliver them to customers again? And so for the first couple of years of our business, we were really focused on managing missed deliveries. And so we spent a lot of time integrating with all of the major carriers. So Couriers Please, Toll, UPS, FedEx, DHL, and a few others, really integrating with them so that they could use our network to manage missed deliveries. And I think what happened after that is that we started to see the rise of e-commerce really affect the logistics industry. Now, most of the carriers that we work with, they're used to B2B delivery. They're used to picking up, you know, a pallet or 200 parcels or whatever and delivering it to another business. And so they really didn't have the infrastructure to provide a great B2C solution. And that's still the case for many courier companies around the world. And if you look at the situation around the world, in most markets, the B2C, the e-commerce business is typically controlled by the main postal service for that market. And the reason for that is that they've already got postal workers who are visiting people's homes every day. And their businesses are designed to do that. So as letters declined, they were able to transpose that letter volume into parcel volume, and they can do that. Whereas the other carriers typically sold their delivered parcels to businesses who were open at the times that they were going to deliver. So there were very few missed deliveries, and they were delivering in bulk. So a collection point network like Hub, and there are collection point networks in many places around the world now, has become more and more and more important to these carrier companies as they want to really take a share of the B2C market and the growing e-commerce market. So that's really what's been happening over the last 3 or 4 years, that has e-commerce has exploded. The need for collection point services to support that has also grown. And we're seeing that exacerbated on the back of the COVID pandemic, so that e-commerce volumes are now even bigger. And the challenge for most logistics companies is they do not have the infrastructure or the capacity within their warehouses to manage that volume. So if I give you an example, one of my carrier partners last year through Christmas had 5 times the volume that they forecast for Christmas. Now, what that meant is through the month of December, they could only get 1 out of every 5 parcels into their warehouse. And some of those carriers came to us and said, David, is there any way we can leave those parcels at one of your collection points, and we will tell our customers that we're not going to be able to deliver it in time for Christmas, but they can go and collect it from one of your locations. And so we did that for some of our partners who already had the technology in place to support it. Now that, in my mind, is a growing opportunity, and it enables Hub to really grow with these carriers and accelerate the business over the last year or so. So Hub now has 18 staff. We're still very small and agile. We're driven by great technology connecting to our carriers, and then great technology at the retail level so that it's easy to manage a parcel through our network. And then we focus very much on having great relationships with our logistics partners, and for them to see us as a partner, helping them work with their retailers so that they can actually get more volume through the hub network. And then that seems to be working really well for everybody. I think the major change for us now is we're getting a lot of retailers coming to us directly for services. So the team and I are spending time really considering what our strategy is going to be going forward so that we can support the growing demand for Hub. So that's a sort of short cottage industry on sort of summary of what Hub is. It's been really hard work, but really exciting. And I think that for the first 4 or 5 years of our company, we almost were a company waiting for the right market opportunity to come along. But one of the things I always say is, if you ever hear me presenting and saying that I knew that Hub was going to be this thing from day one, and that, you know, this was all part of a brilliant master plan from myself, that will be a blatant lie. We've pivoted a number of times over the last 4 or 5 years to take advantage of where the market now is. So that's kind of who we are.
David, I know a number of couriers have experienced like exponential growth over the last 12 months. Do you think, like, we hear a number of statistics being quoted by a number of them starting from around 43 to 55% increase in their volumes compared to last year. Has that been the same experience for Hub as well?
Yeah. What we found is that, you know, there are some who, they're now calling it peak on peak on peak, because every month is a smash record on the previous year. And I think the biggest issue is the fact that although the volumes have grown, there was an expectation that once things normalize, like in Australia, where, you know, the COVID challenge has really plateaued to some extent, that people would go back to their previous shopping habits, and therefore the volumes would subside. But that hasn't been the case. And we're finding that most people who've gone online have decided to stay online. And so the volumes are increasing. And then the challenge from that is how they make sure that they've got their capital infrastructure, the warehouses, the trucks, the drivers, to satisfy that increase in demand. So yeah, we've seen an increase in our volume. We have seen our volume shift from missed deliveries to more click and collect and returns, because more people have been at home because of COVID, and there's been an adjustment in the way that people are working, and more people are working remotely. But there has been an increase in click and collect volumes and returns volumes for our network.
Yeah, it was interesting. In Australia, the ABS did release some statistics that everything had plateaued and was going back to a normal, but that was a very different story being portrayed by the likes of eStore, which is obviously a warehousing company, and a number of other courier companies. So people are now questioning perhaps some of the statistics and what they're saying compared to what others are experiencing. Yeah. So yeah, I agree with you. There is a saying that every 6 weeks, it takes 6 weeks to form a habit and 6 weeks to form another habit. Yes. But I think with the internet shopping, that habit is now formed, and people are realizing that they can save money with their groceries by ordering that online and a few of the other bits and pieces, and save money because they're not affected by the impulse buying that occurs when you do face-to-face. Yeah, what are your views on that?
I think it's been a few things, and sort of one of the stats that's always resonated with me is the fact that I think in April last year, you know, at the beginning of sort of the real focus on COVID, 200,000 people in Australia went online for the very first time. 200,000 people in the month of April. And about 50% of those people are now continuing to shop online. And some of them, they reckon between 20 and 30% have stopped and moved right back to traditional retail with no purchasing online, and some in the middle. And I think what's happened there is that if you look at the age demographic, the vast majority of those people were seniors. And as you say about this changing habit, I think some of them went online and realized that it wasn't as hard or as laborious or complicated as they were expecting. Pretty straightforward. You know, the efficiency of placing an order online was pretty great. I then think because there's a lot of free delivery offers, there wasn't an additional increase in cost for them, but there was also the creation of more choice than the 4 or 5 places they would typically shop in the past. And so I think the convenience of shopping online, the fact that it all just works, and then things are being delivered right to your door, people are now seeing a positive experience rather than what they thought may have been an experience that they had to do simply to support the fact that they were stuck home because of the pandemic. And that is what I think is continuing to drive the increase in volume and the increase in demand. That the new habit that has been formed is actually quite a positive habit versus their expectation that this was going to be an onerous experience.
Yeah, great. Okay, we are pretty close to starting now. We've probably just got a couple of more minutes, maybe 2 or 3, before David will begin his presentation on how retailers can reduce their last mile and in the carbon footprint. Are there any questions that anyone might have at this point with David's background on Hub? Yep, all agreeing that basically.
Yeah, David, may I just ask, in times of pandemic, what assurance do we give to our customers for the deliveries?
Yeah, I think Marjorie, that's been a real challenge, because what's happened is, because the order volumes were so high and the number of carriers they had hasn't necessarily grown as fast. I mean, one of the things in Australia, for example, is every courier company wants more drivers, and there just aren't that many drivers available. So what's been happening is that with the most important thing, I think, has been notifying customers of changes in their delivery expectations. So what has happened is a lot of couriers are now saying to their customers, look, typically we would have delivered next day, but now it's actually going to be 2 days. Or if you don't place an order by this date, we can't guarantee that you're going to receive it by another day. So the main thing with customers was notifying them of these changes in the delivery timeframes. If you look at the Australian market, the growth in same-day delivery has been incredible. You know, everybody is ordering everything to be same-day delivery. But the reality is, I think only about 27% of people actually need that consignment that day. They're happy to get it 2 or 3 days later, but they've got into the habit of demanding it on that day because it's available when they place the order. So I think that the most important thing that the carriers can do now is accept that there are going to be delays and efficiencies, and they can increase resourcing, but they must notify the customer. It's very important to notify the customer. Most customers are quite forgiving if they're notified, but if they're not notified, they can be very upset very quickly.
Yeah. So there are, of course, I know that there are health protocols also for those who are delivering. They are very strict.
Did you say health issues?
Yeah, the health protocols, and that's also the concern of the customers on the health protocols of those delivering our goods that we order online.
Yeah. Well, one of the things out of that, Marjorie, that's been really interesting is that obviously in the past, you know, you always had to sign on the glass, right? And so
Mm-hmm.
everybody wanted contactless delivery. So
Yeah.
what happened is it meant that contactless delivery meant that the courier could just leave all of the consignments without getting a signature. And
Yeah.
so the issue is now, did they have a safe place to leave those consignments? So what we're seeing now is a lot of parcels just being left, which is great for the courier because it means that they can be more efficient, they can do more deliveries, they're not waiting for you to sign on glass. But in a lot of instances, those consignments aren't being left in safe places.
Yeah.
I bought a new phone 2 weeks ago or 3 weeks ago, and phones, you know, so it was an iPhone, pretty expensive, and it was just left on the side of the street outside my house. And
Yeah.
I was quite upset about that because, you know, if somebody had taken it, then I have to contact the phone company and all of those sorts of things. So especially on higher value items, what we're finding is if I had the option, I would have said, well, look, I know they don't want a signature and that they're not going to stay for a signature. So maybe I will have that item directed to a collection point and I can pick it up on my way home versus having it just sitting on the side of the street.
Yeah, actually, that's my practice. I don't really sign if they require me that there should be a signature. I said I'm sorry, but I am not getting out of my house to sign the delivery. So what they do is as an alternative strategy is they will just leave it on my doorstep on the gate, and they will just have to document it by having a picture of my house address, meaning
Yes.
and together with the package, so meaning to say that I received it, and I think that would be fine because
Yeah.
I think it's good for me as a customer plus the one delivering the goods. But there
Yeah.
was one instant, David, that
Yes.
that it was actually a cake from a high end bake shop, and they just left it on my gate. So and then they called me and said, okay, we had already your cake on your gate. And I said, huh, so you just and it was a very hot day, so
Yes.
so if they didn't call me, I should not have gotten out of my house, and what would happen to the cake? So maybe it melts, and then those are the things that are the challenges of our online placing of our orders now and just delivering, because they know that I don't really go out of my house to receive the deliveries. So I think that's a good health protocol also, right?
Yeah. I think the main thing there is that they're notifying you and telling you what they're doing, right? It's when people aren't being notified, so something might just be sitting outside for days, or they don't know that it was delivered. That's the thing I think that frustrates most of us. We're pretty tolerant if we're notified, right? But if we're not notified, I think it's very frustrating.
Well, thank you, David. I think it's already 2:59. We had already the participants coming in, Karin. So are
Yeah.
there some more coming in?
Yeah, we have those that we're waiting on now in, David. Mikhail, would you like to do another introduction for those that weren't with us a little bit earlier?
Yeah, sure. All right. First of all, thank you, David, for telling us about Hub. And for those who just came in, if you have any questions for David, you just let's just leave it later, and we will have a question and answer portion for that. But for everyone here, welcome. You might be surprised with our guest. Yes, he is the David McLean. So again, welcome to our webinar entitled How Retailers Can Reduce Their Last Mile Carbon Footprint. So before I hand it over again to Mr. David, I would just like to remind everyone again who just got in about our house rules so we can have a very good webinar for this afternoon. So again, first of all, I would like to remind everyone to please be on mute all throughout the webinar so we can hear all the necessary information that Mr. David will share to us. And also, you may hit the reaction buttons if you have any reactions, or if you understand and if you agree to anything our speaker is saying. You may use the like or the heart button. So for those who just came in, Can you please try the reaction button for us? Yes, you may just click on the like or the heart button. Let me see if that works for you. Yes, I can see. Thank you so much for those who reacted. Yes, all right. You may use that later when Mr. David is presenting. And next one, if you have, again, if you have any questions, you can just leave it in our chat pod panel. You can see that in your control panel, our chat box. You can type in your questions, and later we will try to answer all of them in our question and answer portion. All right. All right. So welcome everyone. Good afternoon. It's a very wonderful afternoon here. I'm currently in the Philippines, but wherever you are, we are wishing you a very good day, and you are in for a treat for today. We will be having a very fruitful webinar. So for those who were not able to enter earlier in our webinar, in our Zoom meeting room, let me introduce to you first again our speaker for today. He is the CEO and the founder of the leading Australian parcel collection point network called Hub. It is a Sydney-based startup that has shaken up the long-standing e-commerce delivery space by offering an alternative approach to parcel delivery. So I'm guessing everyone is very familiar here with parcel delivery, especially at these times, right? If you have any questions regarding that, you may ask them later. Mr. David has been able to work in organizations such as Microsoft Datacom and UBS, and very good news for the people here in the Philippines. He has recently expanded his network here in the Philippines and also in Taiwan, in Hong Kong, and will soon be in other Asian markets this year. So his expertise spans multiple industries, including logistics, retail, marketing, organizational change management, and category management. So here with us this afternoon to talk about how retailers can reduce their last mile carbon footprint. Let's give it up for Mr. David McLean.
Right. Let me just share my screen here. Can everyone see my screen?
Yes, we can see it, David.
Yep. Great. Okay. Well. Firstly, McGrath, thank you very much for that introduction, and thank everyone for allowing me some time to walk through this question and give you a perspective on sustainability in the last mile. Look, we think that obviously e-commerce has been growing for many years on the back of increased urbanization, the increased purchasing power of the middle class, a widening product range, and new digital business models, and the wider customer base. And without doubt, this has been exacerbated by the pandemic, which has created accelerated growth. And so I wanted to start this discussion with some fast facts on the current landscape. And this, I promise, is the busiest slide that you'll see today. But starting on the top left, right, I can tell you that e-commerce continues to grow, and it's largely been driven by 4 key factors. The first one is that more people are living in cities, with increased urbanization set to continue, with 60% of people living in cities by 2030, according to the World Economic Forum. And more people are buying online, with growth over the last year equivalent to between 5 and 10 years planned growth. And by the end of 2021, 2.1 billion people will be online shoppers. There's actually been a 10% per annum growth in e-grocery. And I'm personally fascinated by the fact that 32% of furniture sold in the US now is actually sold online. So just a growth in purchase types, choice, and convenience, the ability to buy more and more things online is really just quite incredible in my view. And there's been a rapid growth in same-day delivery. And the problem with that is it actually reduces consolidation opportunities. And depending on the market, there's been between a 20 and 40% growth. And interestingly, we conducted a survey, and it showed us that only 27% of customers who select same-day shipping actually need it. In fact, most people select same-day shipping because they believe it's a better guarantee that that consignment will be prioritized and they'll get it. Now, if you move down the page a little, of course, all of this, as I said, has been exacerbated by the COVID-19 pandemic, with many consumers fundamentally changing their buying habits for good. And so if I walk over to the right side of this screen, the question is, so what has been the impact of these changes? And I've tried to walk through them here on the right. The first thing with e-commerce growth accelerating is, as I said, online sales, we think will be about 20% of all sales by 2023. E-commerce in Australia, for example, is up 80% year on year, and 200,000 households shopped online for the first time in April 2020. So this growth is not declining. One of the sort of outcomes of that is that last mile delivery vehicles are increasing. So delivery vehicles will increase, according to the World Economic Forum, by 36% by 2030, with congestion rising by 21%. And what this means is there's going to be an additional 11 minutes added to the daily commute of the typical passenger. So more vehicles on the road, more congestion. And obviously on the back of that, more carbon emissions, and these continue to rise. So emissions from delivery traffic will increase by 32% by 2030 in the top 100 cities worldwide. And that's a real concern and a real problem that everyone's trying to address. Congestion is increasing already, but it has grown 20 to 35% since 2010. So in 11 years, that's how much growth we've had in congestion. And we obviously expect to see that continue to grow. One thing, though, on the other side is that there is an offset of some e-commerce traffic. In fact, 30% of e-commerce delivery traffic could be offset by a reduction in individual shopping trips. So people getting into the car and driving to the mall to buy things, that can actually be reduced, and it offsets the increased volume of trips that are being made by delivery companies to deliver consignments to home. Now, on the back of that, there's actually been some attitudes from customers that are also changing. As I said, last year we conducted a survey and we found that we actually interviewed 1,000 regular e-commerce customers, and we asked them about their delivery preferences as it pertains to carbon emissions. And what we found is that there's an increasing change in consumers' attitudes as it relates to sustainability. So we found that 86% of customers would like an option to deliver some of their parcels to a local hub of some sort if it reduced carbon emissions. And new research, according to Metapack out of the UK, from their latest retail report, shows that 32% of customers now value sustainability of their shipping above cost and speed. And this is up 19% on the previous year. And what that suggests is that there is momentum towards delivery choices and habits that now have a potential to impact the economic wallet of the e-commerce industry. We actually think this opens the door to new considerations around shipping. And considering the growth from 19 to 32% in 1 year, post-COVID, we can only imagine what that growth in people's concern around sustainability and sustainability in their shipping will become. And finally, 69% of our respondents wanted their retailers to label low carbon emission delivery options in their shopping carts. And I actually think that's an incredible statistic, and something that would be very easy for the e-commerce industry to adopt as a part of really demonstrating their green credentials, to demonstrate to their customers the various shipping types and options they have, and which of those shipping options is the most carbon friendly. And finally, 79% of our respondents wanted carriers and retailers to, across the board, find ways to reduce carbon emissions. So I believe that this is an issue that's not going away anytime soon, and truly needs to be addressed by the industry. There are a number of options for the logistics industry to consider around improving sustainability in the last mile. And there has been much activity in the space of sustainable packaging and paperless delivery, for example. There's also been marked improvement in automation, efficient delivery models, and AI improvements for both package routing and order management. And according to our research, some of the major considerations supported by customers are reflected in this chart. So 69% of customers want to see retailers use biodegradable packaging. That to me is an inflection point percentage, and basically means that we should expect biodegradable packaging to become the standard for the way that retailers manage their packaging to support sustainability in the last mile. Consumers also want to see incentives to leverage recycled packaging and actually manage that recycling packaging better. So locations where they can drop their packaging off, ideas like that, they want to see more of that thought about. I think we're at about a 45% response rate on that. A lot of retailers see the opportunity to reduce paper usage by going digital is very important. And we see that in the returns area. We've all bought parcels, and inside there's a return slip that you can fill out. So they really want to make these things as automated and leverage technology as far as possible. So we're not generating labels, and we're not providing paper in packages. A large majority of the time are not going to be used anyway. The use of recycled paper, I think, is a uniform expectation around any industry today. One of the big bugbears for many customers was stop using large packages for smaller items. And there are some very big merchants and marketplaces around the world that have this almost one-size-fits-all approach. So I'm sure we've all had the experience of buying something very small that's turned up in a rather large box. That's completely wasted packaging. It's actually an inefficient way to deliver items as well, because it's taken up more space in the back of the van. And so there really must be a way to look at that. Interestingly enough, you can see that the smallest percentage here was looking at ways to reduce returns. And I actually think that's because consumers like the option of returning. And because returns are free, people are very comfortable placing orders and then returning a number of items, especially millennials, according to our research, high order values, but high returns values as well. They actually return a lot of items. And so they see this as a way to, in effect, go through the showroom and try on different things. And so you can see that the number of people who want to see a reduction in returns actually is less than all of the other initiatives. Another good one, consolidate deliveries. We don't necessarily, if we don't need everything same day, and as I already mentioned, only about 27% of the items we order, we actually want same day. Well, that means that we could potentially give retailers the opportunity to consolidate all of those deliveries into a single shipment. And so I think that this is something else that's really going to be focused on quite aggressively, because it works across the whole ecosystem. Less packaging, more consolidation, less trips to individual homes. a repeated number of times in the same week. So anything that drives that, I think, is something that consumers are going to support. And obviously, offering click and collect to consolidate deliveries as another solution, I think, is something that our respondents found quite attractive, and obviously we would be fully supportive of as Hub. Now, for the purposes of this discussion, however, I want to talk about the physical movement of parcels and how collection points are impacting the debate. So B2C deliveries, delivering to home, is typically low density in that there are a number of stops for a small number of parcels. And this causes for an increase in emissions as volumes rise. So I believe in Australia, the typical courier can deliver 150 parcels a day. So in a B2C situation, they may literally be delivering 150 parcels to 150 different locations and therefore making 150 trips on a particular route. And then any of those items that were misdelivered may go back to the depot, and then the whole process starts again the following day. So this is a very inefficient way to deliver, and it's very much been created because of the postal services in the past and the fact that they always had people delivering letters to every single household on a route. Now, out of home takes into account PUDOs, which are pick up and drop off locations, and lockers. And so they are what we refer to as collection points. Now, delivering to a collection point typically creates higher densities of deliveries. So if that courier who's doing 150 deliveries a day can drop 20, 30, 40, 50 deliveries to a collection point in one go, then that driver has automatically reduced the number of trips they're making, and that's going to support a reduction in carbon emissions. Now, considering the fact that in large part, customers collect their parcels as a part of an existing trip, there is an overall reduction in carbon emissions. And what we're saying there is typically about 32% of people actually make a unique trip to collect their parcels from a collection point. Most people, because they actually do not need it that day, will actually collect it as a part of an existing trip on the way to work or on the way home from work. So, you know, if you do rough math, if a courier is delivering 100 individual parcels and they can leave 50 of those parcels at a location point, and then we only have sort of 30% of those parcels create an individual trip, then there's a saving of 35 parcels in terms of delivery, and then obviously the carbon benefits that come from that. Now, in fact, I am sure that you're going to ask me to validate those points, and I'm happy to do so. According to the Carbon Reduction Institute of Australia, carriers who leverage collection points can have a marked impact on their CO2 emissions. For example, based on a study conducted on the Hub network, carriers that use Hub typically reduce their CO2 equivalent emissions by 0.47 kilograms per kilometer. And this is based on existing volumes moving through their delivery routes and degree of usage of the Hub network. And we're really proud of that statistic to be able to demonstrate that we are reducing carbon emissions by almost half a kilo for every kilometer when a collection point is used is a very powerful message that we want to continue to promote to the logistics industry to support supply chain. And this solution to support sustainability is occurring at a time in which demand for click and collect services is growing. Now, I believe this is largely driven by customers wanting more choice, convenience, and control in their delivery. But I also think key to this change has been the renewed focus of carriers to find additional ways to distribute consignments whilst they're under pressure due to the unprecedented volumes and limited capacities that they have. And as we all know, this has been exacerbated or accelerated because of the COVID-19 pandemic. According to Taylor Schreiner of the Adobe Digital Insights group, buy online and pay in store, which is another word for click and collect, was a niche delivery option before the pandemic. And it is fast becoming the delivery method of choice as consumers become more familiar with the ease, the convenience, and the experience. And on a global level, about 20% of shoppers prefer an alternate delivery location to home. And just in Australia alone, when we look at pure play online retailers, they should truly consider ways to create an omni-channel style solution via click and collect. In Australia, 52% of the top online retailers actually provide a click and collect service. But outside of the top 100, that actually drops down to only 25% of retailers who actually offer that service. So it really does demonstrate that there is room for growth to promote and start to think about sustainability via collection points. Now, further, according to the Worldwide Collection Point Usage Report that's been prepared by the last mile experts out of Europe, in the coming years, most markets will have out-of-home collection points. And the expectation is that within the next few years, most markets will have roughly about 40% of their collection being done out of home. And on the left, you can see the current volumes of out-of-home delivery to collection points by market. And it's fascinating to me that China, Poland, Denmark, Israel, Norway, Sweden, Finland are all already having 40% of their parcels collected via out-of-home solutions. And you can see that this is a model that is still quite relevant across the remainder of Europe. And then you can see at the top, there are some markets that still have some way to go. Australia and New Zealand are included there at sub 10% of consignments being shipped out of home. And funnily enough, the US is a very slow click and collect market. There isn't a robust solution for that unless it's largely volume going through Amazon lockers. So a lot of room to grow there, but you can see across a lot of the European markets that the penetration for this model is extremely high, and we expect it to continue in other markets around the world. So at Hub, we consistently designed our network with this challenge in mind. And, you know, we built a network in Australia, for example, with 2,000 locations, and we integrated with the major carriers to support both click and collect and returns throughout the network. We think that the successful collection point networks are going to be the ones that make it easy for retailers to plug into the network and also enable them so that they can plug in via the major e-commerce platforms. And there certainly seems to be an increased focus from retailers in having these solutions offered to their customers. And so we think that there is going to be more and more demand from organizations like Hub to provide similar services. I wanted to close this presentation by walking through in a bit more detail the benefits of sustainable delivery through collection points from the perspective of three of the core stakeholders, being carriers, retailers, and the customer. So if I start with carriers, obviously carriers know that they are a real problem in terms of carbon emissions within the last mile. So they're looking for sustainable B2C delivery solutions, but they want to leverage their existing B2B infrastructure. They're never going to have hundreds of postal type workers who can go on routes delivering to every store like the post office does. So they have an issue with order density. Via a collection point, they are able to increase the delivery density, and that drives down their costs. And that's very important to them. Reverse logistics, actually taking missed deliveries, missed e-com deliveries back to the depot for a redelivery, is another issue that is solved via a collection point that creates improved efficiency. And obviously carbon emissions, being able to offer a collection point solution so that they're improving that density, integrating it directly into the carts for their customers so that they're having more volume directly injected into those collection points rather than doing deliveries to home, actually drives and supports them providing an effective last mile solution. When we think about the consumer, well, they're looking for more control through convenience and choice, offering reliability, security, and sustainability when they're online with e-commerce. So the problem for them is limited delivery options. Collection points give them more choice in collection. Poor parcel management. It gives them control over parcel delivery, the time when they get parcels, whether they have it same day, next day, and limited green delivery, because they are focused more and more so on providing and having sustainable options around their delivery, having a collection point network where they can demonstrate, or it can be demonstrated to them, that these networks are reducing carbon emissions, enables them to have a solution that gives greener shipping. And finally, the retailer. The retailer wants sustainable delivery options, in large part because their customer wants it. They obviously want increased conversion and increased customer satisfaction. And the message we're trying to give to them is that sustainable shipping actually does increase your conversion. So they have high delivery costs. If they actually use these networks and encourage more of their items to go through a click and collect network, they can actually drive down their delivery costs whilst offering a sustainable solution. If they're offering more choices, as I mentioned previously, around sustainable shipping, they put details on their labels, for example, in the cart saying this is the most sustainable delivery option. That may increase their cart conversion rates. And there again, as they're increasing the number of orders they're taking because they're providing this service, they're actually getting that increased conversion and increased support to support their sustainable credentials. And then they're in a poor eco-friendly supply chain. Moving away from a poor eco-friendly supply chain would be working with a supply chain that offers a collection point network, because we know by offering that network, they are supporting their own sustainable e-commerce credentials. I want to close by saying that we believe solutions around the sustainable last mile will continue to include collection point services, whilst adding value for the carrier, the customer, and the retailer. Now, Hub obviously is extremely passionate about this, as it falls in line with our goal of supporting better ways for customers to experience e-commerce by creating cohesion between retailers, carriers, and collection. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. David. That was a very nice topic, and we've learned so much from you. And for me, it also gives me a perspective, not only as a client, but it also gives me a point of view for as retailers, as you may say. Now we are going to entertain questions for Mr. David. If you have any for our guests here online, if you have any questions, you may type in our chat box. Yes, feel free to type in your questions. All right, we are going to wait for your questions for Mr. David. But before that, let me start the ball rolling. I have a question, Mr. David. Would you say that this accelerated growth caused by the pandemic has greatly affected Hub in terms of your original plan of growth? And would you say that because of the pandemic, it also added awareness in sustainability, or was it in your, or was it originally planned to be in your business?
Certainly, COVID has accelerated the demand for the network and the increase in volumes. I'd say at the first part of COVID, because everyone was at home, there were less missed deliveries. So that part of our business fell away. But because of the just incredible amount of volume, the carriers have realized that by promoting a collection point network, it was reducing costs. I think the sustainability issue is not necessarily one that carriers themselves have been particularly passionate about. I think it's the customers who are creating the change in their behavior. And therefore, the hub network and networks like us around the world are a great solution for them to actually promote the fact that there are these sustainable solutions. So I don't think it's necessarily out of the goodness of all of the carriers' hearts all of a sudden. I think it's more a case of them saying, look, it matters to our customers. They want to feel better about buying online and not destroying the planet. So we must find a solution that's going to support that. And organizations like Hub make that easy. I would say, Miguel, that the other key factor in that is being able to provide the technology that makes this easy for the customers to engage. And so making it easy for a retailer to onboard and connect, and making it easy for the carriers to connect, all of that stuff is really as important as providing the service itself.
All right, thank you for that. So if anyone has other questions, you may type in our chat box.
There are no more questions, Miguel.
All right. Without further, because of that, we would like to thank you, Mr. David, for joining us here this afternoon. We have learned a lot from you, and we will surely be taking note of everything that we learned today. So again, thank you so much. And for our registrants, we really appreciate you being here with us. And we would like, if you enjoyed this webinar, we would like to invite you in our upcoming webinars as well. We have the one for WELAT on the 20th of April, and another one with the Vice President of the Philippines, Ms. Lenny Robredo, on the 30th of April. So those are all very exciting webinars. So please stay tuned for more updates from CILT's Philippines social media accounts and website. So this has been your host. I am Miguel, and together with our valued speaker, David McLean, and from all of us here in CILT, thank you so much and have a good day, everyone.